Hi, Helen.
How are you?
Fine, and you?
Good, thank you. I've made you co-host.
I'm going to take, thanks. I'm doing this session today, obviously because Valence's down in PE.
Okay.
Hello.
Good
Hi, Russell.
afternoon, Russell.
Afternoon. I couldn't hear you earlier. Thanks.
Helen, sorry, could I just ask if you could send the link to Michelle? I sent out an email earlier this morning. I'm not too sure why she didn't get it. Thank you. Hi, Michelle. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I see that it is 2 minutes past 2. We've got 9 participants. So if you don't mind, I would just like to give everybody another 3 minutes. If we can start at 5 past 2, give everybody a few more minutes just to come in, and then we will start with everything. In the meantime, if you want to, you can just get into the Google Classroom. You will see that I have opened up all of the modules for today. So you can just check that everything is working okay within your Google Classroom. But yeah, we'll start in about 3 minutes time. Thanks.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Julian.
I just wanted to check if my sound is working properly.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's not Julian. It's Julian's PC.
Sorry.
No.
Getting it off the screen.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just put my camera on very quickly. Hope you all had a good week. I think we are going to start. We have 14 participants online. Helen, I'm not sure if you're going to stay with us for the duration. Of course, you're more than welcome, but you are also more than welcome to leave. I know, and thank you for putting this all together for us. I really do appreciate it. Valencia, neither Valencia or Martina were able to make this afternoon, so you'll have me for the rest of the modules for this course. Just a few things that I've started to pick up as we've started moving through and trying to use Google Classroom. In the free version of Google Classroom, the quizzes don't work. So what I'm going to do is I will restructure the questions for the quizzes and then just put them up, and then you can just resubmit it again. So what happens is that you can answer the quiz, you can upload it, but when we try to mark it, there's nothing that comes up. So the quiz doesn't actually show. So I just need to go back and try to restructure some of those. It's not going to affect you in any way at all, so don't worry about it. And the other thing that I want to reiterate, because it came up as a little bit of a concern from the previous group, is that there are no deadlines for any of these tests, quizzes, little assignments, etc. Once we've done with today's session, it's basically up to you to complete all that is required. Go in and have a look what is needed for your portfolio of evidence. Upload all of those documents. And once you're done, we will then go in, mark everything, let Helen know at head office that you have completed all the requirements. We've had a look at your video, etc., and then you'll get your coaching level 2 designation awarded to you. So even although you might find that there are some dates that are factored in, please ignore them. I'm going to actually just go in as soon as I've got a bit of time and just clean up so that you don't have any dates due for assignments, and that you don't feel that there's any pressure to actually upload anything. So really it's now self-study. It's up to you. However long you take, however short you take, that's fine. Obviously, this will be, the classroom will be open for as long as it takes for the last person to complete all of their requirements. So it is going to still be up there. You don't have to worry. Nothing's going to be taken off of the Google Classroom platform. Are there any questions in the meantime?
Okay, Heather,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Hi, Sandra. Yes.
Hi. So I'm using Classrooms, the free version, and the quizzes does work on the free Classroom. There's just a little setting that you have to change.
Okay, then maybe what I'll do, because I actually sat with a teacher that was using it, a high school teacher during the week. I spent about an hour and a half with her going through everything, and we couldn't for the life of us get it together. But I'm happy to take this offline, and then I can maybe just sit with you and you can just show me and we can see if it works.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. I appreciate that. Thanks, Sandra. Are there any
Heather,
other questions? Yes.
Sorry,
Michelle?
Heather. So I did the quiz and I submitted it. So
Yeah.
from my side, it looks like you've received it and everything else. How do we actually know that you have received it if you say that there is a little bit of a problem?
So it's not the receiving of it. Once you've uploaded it, we will receive it. The problem is getting in to have a look at the answers and marking the quiz. That's where we're having the issue. So
because
I've got an.
It was
Sorry?
a self-marking quiz.
I think it might have been, but either way, I still can't see what you've done. It's coming up as a blank document.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's what the issue is. But, you know, I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. I'm just alerting you to the fact that I am having a bit of an issue, especially with the quizzes. If I can sort it out, great. Then we'll keep them. If I can't, then I'll just go in and I'll just restructure the type of question that I ask. So,
so I'm doing this all off an iPad, not a computer. So the classroom looks a little bit different, and the whole thing's set up very differently.
yeah.
So I did the wider certificate, which I've downloaded and is on my computer. Can I submit that separately, or do I have to get it somehow onto the Google Classroom platform to submit it?
No, you'll need to put it onto the Google Classroom. I tell you why, is that let's say, for example, now you email that to me, then I sit with it on my computer. Then I've got to make a file for Michelle Davey and have all of her stuff in there. Then that file's got to go through to Helen, and it just becomes too disjointed. So my preference is we've got the platform. Under your portfolio of evidence, that's where you submit that document. And then when I go into this particular classroom, your name is there and all of your files and documents and everything is up there. And it just makes it easier for myself, because then it also allows Helen, Valencia, you know, whoever else has got access to this to go in and just double check when they want to issue the certificate that you have actually got everything in place, in one place.
Okay. I will try and get it onto Google Classroom, because it's downloaded, it's done.
Yeah.
But I just managed to do it off the Google Classroom platform for some reason.
You might need to email it to yourself onto your computer and then try that way.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll try that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, Heather,
cool.
just one question.
Yes.
Yeah, on one of the quizzes, specifically relating to the equipment,
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was just because I was trying to do it at 10:30 at night after a long day, but on the top it said check one answer per line. Okay, for the first section.
Right.
Then the second section, clearly that doesn't apply, because I selected one answer, the best that I could out of the 4 options,
Right.
and only ticked that. As a result, I got all of them wrong, because you can actually tick more than one selection. So maybe just on the quiz, it should actually just state there that select all that apply, or whatever the case might be.
Okay, I can go back and just recheck that.
Or
As I
just
said,
a brain fart on my part.
no, that's fine. No, don't worry. The more feedback I can get with regards to how this is all set up, and remember, as the instructor and the developer of all of this, I don't get to see how you are interacting with the content. So anything that I can do to make it easier for you, then I can just go back and just refine it. So I'm very happy to get all of this information back, feedback, so that I can just try and improve it a little bit. So thank
Right.
you.
Thank you. So if you do notice that, I'm not that doff.
No,
I didn't get them all wrong.
That's no problem at all. I'm still trying to iron out all of the teething problems with Google Classroom.
So Heather, that one question that did come up on your quiz of the Malibu rescue, and you needed to tick on which event a Malibu rescue actually fits, which is surf, which is a pool event, which is open water, and there was some, I don't know what the 4th one is. So I'm Stillwater. So we do Malibu rescue in Stillwater, which so I ticked it as open water. And then when I went down to see, okay, did I get everything right or wrong or what? It actually marked it as wrong. And it actually tells it wants it as surf, not as open water.
Yeah, no. So it was probably also because I think that question has multiple answers. And I think that's what, who was it that I was just speaking to now?
So that particular section, you can only press one.
Yeah. So it was supposed to be a multiple answer option. But again, now that I'm getting the feedback, I can just go back and double check. what the settings were and all of that. So yeah, the quizzes are just causing me a little bit of a headache, but I'm hoping that Sandra will be able to help me out with that. So Sandra, I'll get hold of you.
Yeah, it was only the Malibu question that you could only select one.
Yeah.
The other ones, you could select all four, but it was only that Malibu rescue. It only accepted one answer. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thanks for the feedback. We'll get that sorted out. Did anyone else want to bring up anything with regards to either the content or the assignments or quizzes or anything from last week? Okay, great. I'm now going to just stop my video and I'm going to start sharing my screen so that we can start with the actual content.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I'm late. Okay.
No problem.
The question I'm asked was about uploading the certificates.
Yes,
I tried to upload and I couldn't, and I just forward you a copy of the PDF form of certificate. And if you received that.
Okay, so you're having a problem with the upload?
Yeah, do I upload in a JPEG format or do a PDF format?
No, the PDF is fine. So were you not able to upload anything in your portfolio of evidence?
No, I couldn't.
Okay, all right.
The water certificate I wanted to upload to you and I couldn't upload it.
Okay, no, that's fine. Again, I'll just go back and double check what the issue is there. And as soon as I've sorted out all of these little things, nigglies, then I'll just send out an email and just let you know. So thank you for that, Denver.
Okay, sure.
All right. Any other questions before we start? Okay, great. All right, so we'll just move into the classwork. We are now going into module 3. No, yes, module 3, where we're going to look at the long-term participant development. Okay, so basically the LTPD, it started off probably about 10 years ago with Istvan Bali. He is a academic and coach from Canada, and he's written a book called Long-Term Athlete Development. And when SASCOC was busy setting up the coach education program, they set up a long-term coach development program, and they also set up a long-term athlete development program. However, the name was changed to be a little bit more inclusive for within the South African system, and it changed from long-term athlete development to long-term participant development. So it becomes a lot more inclusive. And this is the South African Sport for Life model. Okay, so basically, if we have a look at the areas of excellence, it's a very, very small triangle that we are actually dealing with. And what we want to look at is the competitive for life, and even more important than that is your fit for life. But we can't do that until we have dealt with your active start, your fundamentals, and your learn to train. So this is where our foundation is. This is where the contact to life-saving first happens. This is where we develop the physical literacy, as it is now called. And basically what that is being able to move and being able to execute movement in the correct way. So skipping, jumping, running, hopping, any bilateral movements, backwards, forwards, to the side, crossing, the planes, etc., etc. All of those are what we call fundamental movement skills. And if the little ones don't have that base, it becomes extremely difficult once we move into the excellence phase of this model for us to put any remediation in place. So usually what would happen when we had physical education in the schools, we had a good program going. A lot of us would have gone through phys ed at school, and we learned how to skip, to hop, to jump, to leap, to gallop, to run and swim and all of those things. So our fundamentals here laid a very good foundation for us. What we have found now with children is they are not getting good physical education at school. So if they are not given opportunities to develop those fundamental movement skills in training in the other sports that they are doing, they miss out on this active start and fundamentals. And it becomes extremely difficult for us then, as I said, to put any remediation in place when they want to pursue the excellence path. So it has become more and more important for us as coaches, especially the NIPA coaches. You are now taking over what the physical education teacher would have done at school. You need to make sure that they understand do they know how to skip properly? Do they know how to hop and leap and jump on one leg and on the other leg? What is their balance looking like? Can they do diagonal kinds of movements, etc., etc.? And if you incorporate those kinds of things, just in a fun warm-up, you will very, very quickly see which kids are lacking those kinds of movements. And it's because it's not getting taught here. So, even with the tracking, the hand-eye ball coordination, or just even the hand-eye coordination, if you think of the skills that are needed, for flags, for jumping onto the mallee, for reading the surf, all of that kind of stuff, it becomes extremely important that the basics are done well. So these are the three first phases that the kids need to go through. And only once they've gone through the learn to train, do they move into this excellence path where there's train to train, train to compete, and train to win. Otherwise, they'll just fall into the competitive for life or the fitness for life. And this, again, is where the majority this is where we want our nation to be, because it's extremely important for national health. Okay,
Sorry.
so yes.
Are you sharing a presentation right now, or you're just talking?
I am. Can you not see my presentation?
Yes, I can't see it. Can anyone else?
I can't see it either, no.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me see what the hell's happening here.
Can't see it either.
My screen says
see it
Julian.
now? Are you able to see it now?
No.
No, nothing on my side.
No.
It's coming now. Yes.
Oh
There we
my
go.
gosh. Now do I have to repeat everything? Sorry about that. Okay. So this was the model that I was just talking about, the South African Sport for Life model. And these are your fundamentals that I was just speaking about, and are so important for first contact into life-saving. And this is where, as a NIPA coach especially, you are actually more important than your senior coaches, your youth coaches, your national coaches. The NIPA coaches are the most important coaches in our movement, because if you do not do a good job here with those little ones, there's no ways that they are going to move into this path of excellence. And by the time they get to the train to win, then it's just basically by talent that they're getting there, and not because their skills or because they've got good core or anything like that. And then some remediation needs to take place. So really the NIPA coaches, you not only coach for life-saving, but you're also a movement coach. You're a fundamental movement coach. And if you can incorporate some of those fundamental movements, your running, your leaping, your hopping, your galloping, your diagonal movements, moving backwards, forwards, all of those kinds of fun things that you can do in the warm-up, This all assists in them developing their physical literacy. Okay, so I've given you quite a bit of definitions around physical literacy and all of that kind of thing. And then from that model, this is where you get the 7 stages of long-term athlete development. Now, this was taken from Istvan Bali. And when you have a look at the LSA LTPD document, you will see we've got 8 stages, but it's long-term participant development. So we start off with active start. We then move into the fundamentals. The most important thing here is that the kids have fun. Then they move into the learn to train. So what does it feel like for them to be involved in training sets that are structured, that have a plan? You've got a warm up, you've got some skill development, you've got to loosen down, you're teaching them how to use the board, etc., etc. And then once they leave the learning to train, the train to train, train to compete, and train to win, this is where we move into the excellence pathway. And again, if they haven't had the foundation through active start, fundamentals, and learning to train, the train to train, the train to compete, and train to win becomes extremely difficult for those athletes because they haven't got this good foundation. Okay. So you can just read through that document. And I just want to get out of this now. If you go and you have a look at the resources, where is LSA Coaches Framework? Here we go. LSA LTPD. Oops, sorry, I'm going too fast. So basically that is from sandcastles to masters of water. And you will see as you go through this document, all of those stages are in there. And we've got plans that you can follow. We talk about periodization, okay, all of those kinds of things. And then here are all of our stages, all right, that we go through. There's the South African Sport for Life model, which forms a foundation for our LTPD model. And it goes through all the different things with regards to long-term participant development. So you can read through that. When we move into the level 3 coaching, this LTPD document is going to become extremely important, because then we'll go and we'll have a look at the science behind this, this model. We have a look at the different growth spurts that take place with athletes, how you need to ensure that they have got those fundamentals in place before you move into long sets, into heavy sets. When do you start with the gym programs, etc., etc. So just going through this document will give you a very, very good idea around athlete development, and ensuring that we don't have athletes that drop out because of burnout. And we have athletes that have dropped out of life-saving because of burnout, because of overtraining, and it's usually the swimmers, because what happens is that they go for their swimming training, they spend 2 or 3 hours swimming training, and then they come to life-saving, then the life-saving coach needs them to go and do a whole lot of other stuff, and then they're also back in the gym, and it just becomes too much and the body breaks down and we start having a whole lot of injuries. So yeah, if you just have a squiz through that, it will just give you a very good idea around how we are trying to ensure that our athletes do not get burnt out, that our athletes stay within the program, and that we have them for the longevity of their life. So they move through from nippers all the way through. They might follow the excellence path, or they might then move into just enjoying life-saving, and then becoming a master and the technical officials, etc., etc. Okay, are there any questions around the LTPD?
Yeah, just a quick one, Helen.
Sure.
From my thought processes during our current training in the surf section, is that the initial 2 stages to me would be more focused towards your starfish and your micro nippers, rather than now in the slightly older age groups, you'd be moving up into that learning to train and that type of scenario.
Correct. But remember then, you don't always have that nice progression. You know, sometimes you'll have a 13-year-old that comes in because, I don't know, their friend has decided to bring them or whatever. And when you start looking at their movements, you'll very easily see that their fundamental movement skills are shocking. And so that's then where you've got to be really careful with that child, because you now put them into a group of 13-year-olds who may have had 3, 4, maybe 5 seasons of life-saving coaching. Their movements and their fundamental movement skills are relatively good. Now you've got somebody new coming in who might not click as quickly, who may have some kind of issue because they haven't been taught well. They've been sitting around all the time. They're on their phones, on PlayStation or whatever. And you can almost immediately start to pick up some issues relating to the active start, and then also the fundamentals. So it's a very it's very dependent on the athlete or the child that you've got coming into your system. And obviously it's very nice if you've got that same group that goes through and, you know, they go through all the different stages. The problems come in where, you know, you have guys that come in at different stages and then they've got to go back, learn some of the fundamental movement skills, learn the new techniques, etc., etc.
That's where it does get tricky
Yeah.
in actually managing that during your single training session a week type of situation. You know, would it be sensible to then recommend that person to go for additional training somewhere, because you can't necessarily as a coach be able to put that individual focus on one person when you have a very large group to attend to.
Yeah. You know, I think it would be dependent on your own context. You know, is this kid kind of serious? Are they there every single Saturday? What kind of commitment are they showing? What are they doing in the other sports? You know, if it's maybe that, you know, you can have a look and see they might be really good on the beach or not so good on the beach, but they really like the beach events. You know, they might be able to go and do a little bit of track stuff, or, you know, with the swimming, maybe go and get a few lessons with a coach or with a learn to swim teacher, just to sort out their fundamentals. But again, it's so dependent on who's coming in and what your own context is. So you'll have to just have a look and see what the best thing is and stick by your decision.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong here. So it becomes a very gray area. All right. Are there any other questions? Good. Okay. So let's move on to the physical fitness. And I just want to reiterate again that this course is still very generic. We are not going into any of the specifics for either the still water or for the surf or beach. It's to give you a good foundation so that when you move into level 3, not only do you have your own coaching experience, but you also have the theoretical knowledge to build on the in-depth knowledge that you will then require when you move into level 3. All right, so we're going to just have a look at this video. Please just tell me if you can hear it.
Level 2 fitness instruction. Principles of exercise, fitness and health.
Hear it, thanks.
Variables of fitness. By the end of this session, you will be able to describe the importance and reasons for a warm-up and cool-down, describe the physiological implications of specificity, overload, reversibility, adaptability, individuality, and recovery, explain the principles of fit and the principles of modification and progression for each component, and explain how to recognize when and how to regress the training program. Describe the effect of which speed and intensity has on posture. Describe the effect of levers, gravity and resistance on exercise. And describe the differences between programming exercise for physical fitness and for health benefits. Warm-up. Regardless of the type of exercise planned, it should always commence with the structured warm-up. The aim is to place the cardiovascular, respiratory, and neuromuscular systems in a state of readiness for activity. The objectives are to raise the pulse rate, raise the body temperature, mobilize the major joints, and to stretch muscles in an appropriate way, such as dynamic stretching. Types of warm-up. Passive warm-up. This is where we use some form of external heating, such as a sauna. However, we don't recommend you use this form on its own, as it's not an effective warm-up. It merely raises the core temperature. Active general warm-up. This method increases body temperature as the individual engages in activities that involve large muscle groups. This could be the sort of warm-up you do prior to a gym session. 5 minutes on a cross trainer, followed by some dynamic stretches. An active specific warm-up. Specific warm-ups involve the individual going through basic movement patterns using the same muscle groups as will later be used in the activity, only at a reduced intensity. For example, football players will do a football specific warm-up prior to a game of football. Cool down. Any program should also include a cool down to avoid blood pooling and to help recovery. The aim is to return the body and mind to the pre-exercise state. The objectives: increase the pulse rate, decrease the body temperature, and stretch muscles in an appropriate way, such as static stretches and developmental stretches. Training principles. Although every exercise session will commence with a warm-up and finish with a cool-down, the actual content can vary enormously. However, to gain the most benefit from exercise, you need to consider the principles upon which training programs are based. Specificity. Any change or adaptation in the body's muscles, organs, and systems will be very specific to the type of training. To improve running, a training program should include running. Progressive overload. To evoke an adaptation response, the stimulus must be large enough to challenge the individual. Reversibility. Cessation of the stimulus which caused the adaptation to occur will result in a gradual decline, known as use it or lose it. Adaptability. The body will react in accordance with the type of overload to which it is subjected, making it more efficient for any given task. Recovery. Adaptations occur not during the activity, but in the time following it. Therefore, scheduled rest periods are a vital part of any exercise program. Individuality. For a program to be both safe and effective, the different physiological abilities of each client must be considered. Every client will have a different range of motion, different level of strength, different fitness level. Principles of fit. When deciding whether to progress or regress a training program, we refer to the FIT acronym: frequency, intensity, time, and type. If an individual is finding an exercise program too challenging, then we can regress any of the following. If they're finding an exercise program too easy, we can progress any of the following. Frequency. This is the number of training sessions per week, month, or year. The number of times you exercise per week should reflect your current fitness level, the time you have available, any other commitments like family, and your goals. Intensity. This is normally monitored using a percentage of 1 repetition max, RPE, or heart rate. However, there are additional factors which can influence the intensity. For example, lever length. Generally, when we increase the lever length, we increase the difficulty of an exercise. For example, during a lateral raise, if we carry out the exercise with straight arms, the lever is longer, which makes the exercise more challenging. If we bend the elbows to 90 degrees, that shortens the lever and makes the exercise easier. The same applies to a push-up. Push-ups knees shortens the lever, making the exercise easier. Take the knees off the floor, increases the length of the lever, making the exercise more challenging. When we increase the speed of an exercise, this also makes the exercise more challenging. Explosive lifts, or increasing the speed on a treadmill when we're running. However, we must be aware that it becomes increasingly more difficult to maintain alignment and good posture when we increase the speed. Gravity. If we work against gravity, this can also increase the intensity of an exercise, increasing the gradient on a treadmill, or doing abdominal exercises on an incline. Finally, range of motion. If we're carrying out a squat, and we just squat down to a bench, with our knees at 90 degrees, that's going to be less challenging than squatting all the way down to the floor. Time. When planning for cardiovascular training, it is normally measured in minutes, whereas resistance training is usually measured in reps and sets. Time. Changing the type of exercise or activity performed can be used to both progress and add variety to a program, providing the specificity of the adaptation does not move away from the training goal. For example, changing the aerobic exercise from running to cycling, or changing a resistance exercise from a lateral raise to a shoulder press. Principles of a progressive training program. To avoid any plateaus or decreases in performance, the principles of progression and periodization should be applied. Progression. Overload applied should be sufficient to elicit an adaptation, but it should be gradual and not excessive. If the progression is too excessive, this can lead to overtraining and injury. Periodization. By varying the intensity and types of training in phases or cycles, great improvements in performance can be achieved, whilst decreasing the risks of overtraining and injury. Programming exercise for physical fitness and for health benefits. Physical activity involves any bodily movement such as walking to and from work, taking the stairs instead of lifts, gardening, and doing household chores. For inactive people, there's no doubt that increasing this sort of activity can reduce risk of disease and improve health. Exercise is a type of physical activity that requires planned, structured, and repetitive bodily movement, where the intent of improving or maintaining your physical fitness, such as cycling, dancing, walking, swimming, yoga, working out in the gym, or running. Regular exercise will lead to improvements in health-related fitness. Programming exercise and physical fitness for health benefits. To stay healthy, adults aged 19 to 64 should try to be active daily and should do at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity, such as cycling or fast walking, each week, and strength exercises on 2 or more days a week that work for all the major muscles: legs, hips, back, abdomen, chest, shoulders, and arms. Or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity, such as running or a game of singles tennis every week, and strength exercises on 2 or more days a week. Overtraining and injury. Any exercise program requires a balance between overload and recovery. Should the overload stimulus exceed the body's ability to adapt, either injury or overtraining may result. The trainer should therefore be alert to the signs and symptoms of overtraining, which can include sudden poor coordination, lack of ability to concentrate, reduction in performance, irritability, oversensitivity to criticism, reported disrupted sleep patterns, general lethargy, and susceptibility to colds and illness. Can you now describe the importance and reasons for a warm-up and cool-down? Describe the physiological implications of specificity, overload, reversibility, adaptability, individuality, and recovery. Explain the principles of fit and the principles of modification and progression for each component. Explain how to recognize when and how to regress a training program. Describe the effect of which speed and intensity has on posture. Describe the effect of levers, gravity, and resistance on exercise. And describe the differences between programming exercise for physical fitness and health benefits. For more health and fitness education, visit
Okay. So if you just, are there any questions with regards to anything that was said in that video?
The only question that I have, sorry, Heather.
No problem.
Would be, it told us a lot about what happens when you're 19 and above. But not so much the younger ones.
Yeah. So I think the biggest mistake that coaches make when we are training children is we assume that they are mini adults, and we try and give them sets that they either just completely burn out with, or they are not strong enough to do, or they don't have the physiology to cope. So with coaching children, what you have to do is, firstly, you need to know what their capabilities are, all right? Secondly, know that if you're working, especially in those first 3 levels of the LTPD, the active starts, the fundamentals, and the learn to train. The learn to train is where you then start introducing them to structured sets. That's where you can start, having things like, I'll just use a swimming example. maybe like 650s, and they've got to do it on 1.5 minutes, and they need to ensure that, they have at least 20 to 30 seconds rest between each one, etc., etc. So it's not that you want to train them so hard to break them down, but you need to also apply the principles of specificity. So all you do is you take those principles and you just water them down so that you still are able to get fitness out of those kids, all right? You're still able to get their technique correct and work on their technique, but the training does not break them down. And the problem with the little ones is very often they are doing so many activities other than life-saving. So by the time they get to life-saving, you might have sessions 3 times a week or twice a week, or maybe just even on the weekend. By the time they come to you, they've probably had a full week of school sport, of galas. If they're training other sports, of training, maybe 2 or 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours during the week for their extramurals. So you really have to be very careful when it comes to the time that you have as the life-saving coach, because at the nipper level, they very often are not just doing life-saving, they're doing everything else under the sun. And that's where, if you push them too hard, they then lose interest, they don't want to come back, they don't enjoy it, etc., etc. So the principles are the same. You just need to know how to monitor the intensity, and also to realize that they are not little adults, that they definitely cannot withstand high intensity programs or sets, that you do need to give them more rest, and that you just generally look after the physiology of the little ones. It's very, very important that, focus on the technique. Once we've got that, then the speed and the intensity and all of that kind of thing will come. But I'll actually have a look for some materials around coaching children, and see if I can put that up for you, just for you to make some comparisons there. But generally with the little ones, the principles are exactly the same. You're just going to modify it. And the biggest thing that you need to remember is that they're not little adults, that they cannot withstand high intensity training programs, especially, at the 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And then you've got the issues when you've got your early and your late developers. So when they start moving into puberty, then it just becomes a nightmare for you as a coach, because everything just goes pear-shaped. The girls start putting on a little bit of weight. The boys just become lanky and they have no coord, there's no strength there. And you've just, sometimes when that happens, you've just got to sit it out. Encourage them to keep training, encourage them to keep up with their strength. And for me, strength is also very important, right from the micro nippers, is, get them to do fun strength exercises, so that they're starting to build their strength right from when they first enter at the active start level. Because strength is extremely important for posture, for core, for all of those things that are needed for good technique. So again, it's about knowing your athletes. It's about knowing what they can do. And it's also about understanding what the principles of fitness are. But whether it's nippers or whether it's your seniors, the principles stay the same. All you're then doing is just adapting it. Are there any other questions? Okay. If you have a look, I'll just share my screen again. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so there's just a little document here. And what I've done there is just asked for you to give a detailed plan how you would develop a physical fitness for the following pre-season, during season, lead up to competition. And then in your planning, you can describe what discipline and whether you're planning for nippers or for seniors. So, you've all, I think, probably started your season now. So you can just now put in your plan for the season that you have for your particular group of athletes that you are taking through to nationals next year. Okay, so that's the assignment for the fitness. Are there any other questions regarding the fitness component?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
With us, in the serve side of it, normally we normally work with disability, with the ability groups when it comes to the kids.
Yeah.
The high performers are normally in one squad, and then your other kids, like your newcomers. I also find it is very important to liaise with the parents of these kids to know that they are doing some other sport in line with life saving as well, to take a bit of pressure off those kids.
Totally. And that's where, the relationship that you have with the parents and also with your athletes becomes very important. Sometimes, the parents or the athletes won't tell you that they're doing other school sports. Or they won't tell the swimming coach, especially the swimming coaches. The swimming coaches are the bane of everybody's life in life saving, because very often they won't allow the athletes, the kids, to come through and do any kind of life saving training because, they think it's going to mess it up and blah, blah, blah. So I think, you really have to know what are those kids doing before they get to you. And you, all of you have been coaching for more than 3 years. When the kids are tired, when they get to you, you can see it. You can see it in the way that they're walking, in the way that they're responding to you, and all of that kind of thing. And then you just need to back off. So, you have a plan, but your plan needs to be flexible. And it needs to be adjusted for each individual. And yes, it is extremely difficult when you've got a group of 10, 20, little ones running around. But it's important to try and then get your assistant coaches to come on board. And they're the ones that can really, really help you when you have, even although you've got, for example, your high performance, and then you've got your other groups, and then you've got a new group as well. Your assistant coaches are the ones that can really help you identify athletes that are having issues. And, you may then be able to give them over to your assistant coach to give them that time that they need, either to recover or to develop skills. So again, it's very contextualized.
No, thank you for that.
No, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's sometimes good to maybe try and, I would say, not like say play a game, but something fun in between the training session. Just to revitalize them, or just to make them feel a little bit different. It's not just about training the whole time. A bit of I don't know, fun. Even if we just throw the ball in the water and make them go run, pitch it, and having a bit of fun, and then go back to training again. And it does help sometimes just to do that. Definitely.
And Denver, you picked up on the fun aspect. And if we go back to the LTPD, that is the most important after the active start is the fundamentals. It's the fun, getting those fundamental movement skills back. Because if they're tired and you've got a training session happening, you're not going to get anything. Their technique goes to pot, and, it just becomes a nightmare. Break it up. Let them go and do all of their fun things. And then they come back, they feel better, they're more motivated, and it just becomes part of your session again. So, yeah, it's extremely important what you said, Denver. Thank you. All right, I see that it is now 3 o'clock. We've been sitting for 1 hour, and I think we will just take a 5-minute break. So at 3:05, we will start again, and then we'll continue with module 4 and 5. Okay, hope you had a good break. So what we're going to start with now, we'll start with module 4, which is looking at evaluation. I'm just going to share my screen again. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's have a look at this short video.
I'm Mark Upton from Sports Relations, and this is the third part of a presentation I gave a few weeks ago to a group of Level 2 Australian Rules footy coaches. And for those that have seen the previous two sections will know that we've covered some coach learning and how coaches can develop themselves, and also some player learning or skill acquisition methods, particularly around practice design for allowing your players to improve their skill and game understanding. And the third section today is about evaluating performance, and we'll see how Peter Drucker, a famous management guru, is related to that. So the guys that were at the presentation, they just viewed an under-18s game before their course started, or just part of their course that day, and just before I presented. And so the question for them was, how did they evaluate the game, whether that was from a team performance, the individual player, or a certain aspect of the game, for example, ball movement or defensive transition. And for all of them, the main way would have been observation. So observation in real time with the naked eye, or perhaps a pair of binoculars, is probably the most common way for coaches to evaluate a performance. And what I found is very helpful in that observation process is to have a checklist. So rather than just rely on perhaps being distracted or consumed with certain things that happen in a game or a training session for that matter, it's often quite helpful to have a checklist with just 4 or 5 key points for the certain aspects of performance you want to look at. Or if it's a training activity, it might be some questions about, you know, how well are the players executing this concept? Do they understand it? What's happening off the ball? Maybe some key questions to ask players if it's in training, okay, to probe their understanding. So a checklist, I find, is really simple but helpful way to assist in that observation process, because there are some flaws with it, obviously, and we'll cover that in a second. So the second way to evaluate performance is to review it on video. So to be able to have a second look at it and look at specific sections of the performance and multiple times is obviously, you know, very, very helpful in evaluating a performance. And these days, it's for coaches at all levels, it should be possible to collect footage, because you don't have to go to the extent that this guy has with his camera set up, but a number of devices, whether it's a DV camera or flip cams, smartphones, tablets, they can all be used really by anyone that's involved with your club or your team to record a match or record training. And even if that's just once or twice during the year, I'm sure you'll find it a really helpful thing to do to assist in evaluating that game. And then now sometimes you have the luxury to have access to video analysis software that will allow you to tag and break the game down or the training session down further to look at it more closely. But even if it's just in a simple playback on QuickTime or Windows Media Player, you'll find that being able to video review that performance or that training will be very valuable. So I strongly encourage you, if you don't currently do that, the standard practice, or you've never done it, have a go at it. I'm sure you'll find it worthwhile. And so then the third method of evaluating performance is perhaps what we more traditionally think in terms of stats or hard data, objective data about that performance or that training session. And so why would we do that? Well, we know that from studies that even experienced coaches can only accurately recall perhaps 30 to 50% of key events in a match. And key events could be things that happen off the ball, so they might not actually even observe them at all, they might miss them. So there's some weaknesses there. We also know that there's things called cognitive bias. So everyone has cognitive biases that influence how they interpret and might evaluate a performance if they've just observed it live and at one time only. So data and video review, in fact, can help overcome those biases. And so a few tips in terms of using stats and data. I think the first one is whatever data you collect, it needs to end up helping you to make decisions as a coach and take action. So it needs to help you evaluate the performance and perhaps tell you something that wasn't easily observable yourself on your own. So if you're able to observe it with the naked eye first up when you're watching the match or watching the training, you probably don't need to collect the data on it or get anybody to collect data. But if it's stuff that is harder to observe and pick up when you're watching live, then that's the sort of thing that data can be helpful with. But ultimately, the data you collect needs to drive action. It can't just be nice to know stuff. It needs to actually get to the point where it helps you to make better decisions and take better actions in training, design, or feedback to players or other areas. As an example of that, we'll take a non-sporting example. So there's a show in Australia called Bondi Rescue about lifesavers that go out and that might get into a bit of trouble. So it's a doco. And what happened with Bondi Rescue, obviously people tweet about it as the show is in progress, and the producers of the show actually started to analyse all the tweets that came back and the feedback about the show and the comments that were being made. And what they found by analysing all these is they made the assumption that people like the dramatic rescues, and that was what people tuned in for. But in fact, when they analysed the tweets closer, so analysed the data, they found that it was actually the stories behind the guys on the show. So some of their home life or something that happened to them, the reason maybe they become lifesavers, for example, or lifeguards, they were the things that actually attracted the audience and they enjoyed. So they started to change the content of the show to include a few more of those sort of background stories on the guys that appear in the show. So that's an example where data that's been collected has clearly led to action, in this case changing content. But in a sporting example, the action might be training, design, playing strategy, feedback to players. That sort of thing is the action that you hopefully want to come out of the data you collect. And we mentioned Peter Drucker at the start, a well-known management guru, and he said about not worrying about beginning with the answers, but actually start with the questions. So the questions in our case would be, what do we want to know about performance and what aspect of performance do we want to know? Sometimes in a lot of sports, there's traditional stats. So they're the answers and we just start with them. We know we can find out how many passes we had or how many contested balls we had or how many attacking third entries we had. But they're the answers. But what we want to start with are, what are the questions about our performance on the ball or off the ball? So as an example, in the previous section, we looked at skill acquisition methods for players learning to play in tight spaces. So the question about our performance in that aspect might be, how well, when we won the ball in a tight space, were we able to retain possession and come up with a measure or a metric for that gives us an indication of how we're tracking and hopefully improving across the weeks in our ability to win the ball and keep possession of the ball when we're playing in congestion or under high pressure. That's an example of starting with the question and then thinking about the data that might be best to collect to answer that question. And the third tip really is be prepared for, at times, the data will back up your subjective observations, but other times it will conflict with what you've perceived or viewed on the day. So just be prepared and open-minded enough to let the data challenge you when it's not in agreement. Doesn't mean that you have to always then go with what the data says, but you just need to consider it, take it on board, and then make what you think is the best decision or take the best action going forward. So that was our section on evaluating performance.
Okay, let's have some discussion around that. How many of you actually do any kind of evaluation, either at competition or during training, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I do a fair amount. I keep quite a statistical record of what the kids do and perform, and I get to know them quite well because we've got quite a large number generally on the beach. And yeah, it's worked out quite well for us, just using those in team selections, and also just knowing how to push them that little bit further. So historically, we've never really done well in the first 1 or 2 competitions, but we've always seemed to pull through. And yeah, I mean, our under 10s won the SA Surf Championship title, not last year, but I mean, not this season, but the previous season. So that seems to work quite well for us, and how we keep our records, and then how we train. We play games this whole time. We mainly play games, and yeah, and then next year we start giving it a push, and before SA Champ. So that's normally how we do it at the under 10s.
Great.
Level.
Anyone else?
I'd be very interested to find out, because as Gus mentioned, I mean, we keep some records of how the kids are doing, how they're progressing. It's important for the team events. Obviously, we only have limited teams that you can enter at competition time and the like. But I think a lot of that is quite sort of at the level of coordinating activity and sort of managing teams at competitive events. Actually tracking individual performance, I'd be really interested to find out if there's anyone here that's working sort of with juniors and seniors, and how they're doing it, how they're collecting the data, and if they're analyzing it, and whether it's informing sort of the training. Because what's interesting about life saving is that data is very variable. So if you think about timing swims, for example, you can do that in a pool and start to track performance over time. But if you look at life saving, timing doesn't necessarily work that well all the time, because the conditions are so variable and they change all the time. So on a flat day, you may see some great times. On a choppy day, swimmers may be working twice as hard, but getting poorer times. So I'd be very interested to find out how people are using data to sort of inform training approaches when it comes to sort of the junior and senior levels. And if there's any of that we can bring into NIPA programs.
Anyone from the surf side, and then I'll tell you what we do on the stillwater side.
I think sometimes maybe if we ask the kids, or if they are doing like stillwater swimming or doing pool swimming or galas and things like that, it's just maybe just keep and get a kind of a mental record, and just make sure that they actually come back and say, look, we've done that gala last week, and like, what did you do, and what sort of time you do? So I think that's going to give you a broader perspective of what how the pool is probably the best way to measure their fitness and their progression. So if they did do a gala, even if it's a school gala for that matter, I mean, they're still going to come up with 25-meter stuff that they've done. At least you can, okay, well, he's better than maybe 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. At least you know the progression from them that way. That's the way I think maybe you can monitor and see whether, especially the kids that you obviously not earmark, you like generally what they
So Chris, to answer your question, as you know, obviously I coach with under 9s and 10s, and you guys, you're in Denver in the senior groups. But one way I can look at it is in terms of holistic performance. I know that sounds crazy, but basically in terms of herd dynamics, is because of our variable conditions environmentally, like we've got currently a howling southeaster, and we will have that tomorrow. The sea's going to be very rough. But in terms of the individual performance within the pack, within the rest of the pack, you can certainly see when one of your performers is dropping off and dropping further back into the pack, because they're all performing in the same environmental conditions. So you can actually see how they drop off over a period of time, or how they increase in terms of how they're performing in the group. And that's, to me, the only sort of rough estimation that we can get in the ocean, unless you take them to the pool like you're suggesting, and actually track timing and things. But in terms of performance over time, you can see how they're improving within the group that they're competing with and training with in the same environmental conditions. And that's the only way that I do it. I know it's for the juniors and not at the level that you do it, but that's the method that I'm using.
Just a question.
But I think one of the biggest things that I've picked up in just the discussion here is the importance of good record keeping. You have to keep records. So, you know, in the surf, what are the conditions? What events are you doing? What are the placings? Where are your kids? You know, are they having issues getting out? What is their technique looking like? Is it because, you know, when they're coming around the any of the barrels that have been put in, are they losing a little bit of time because they haven't got the good technique, bringing the, you know, the one arm right over and almost ducking down past the barrel that's already been put in, or the can that's already been put in, you know. So I think things like that, where you can also monitor technique, because technique will relate back to good performance. And if you can break down each section of the event, you'll then be able to see the differences in technique that is required for each of those sections. So, you know, I'm definitely not a surf specialist at all, but if you're going out on the Mallee, what is it that you have to be looking for when you want to get out? Are you up on your board? Are you down on your board? When you've eventually got out past the break, are you up on your board? Are you down on your board? When you're turning around the can, the straight that's going across, are you up? Are you down? Coming back, are you up and you down? How are you going to be catching the waves? And if you work the technique that is required for each of those segments of a particular event, that's another way that you can then start to track performance. Because if you've got somebody that's really having difficulty, you know, maneuvering their board coming around the can, well, what is the actual issue there? Is it because they don't have the strength? Is it because maybe they're up on their knees and they should be down, or, you know, whatever the case is? So tracking, breaking down aspects of events could also help. And I'll tell you what I do in the pool. So for every single pool event, I've broken the events down into sections. So for example, the 200 Super Lifesaver has got 8 separate time segments that I collect for each child, for each athlete, for each race. So the first time segment is going to be their 50 underwater, their 50 meters. The second is the 25. The third is to go down and collect the dummy. The fourth is when they are towing the dummy back to the other side. The fifth is then when they are putting on their fins and their tube. The sixth is the 50 meters with the tube that they are going to go and collect the dummy. The seventh is the actual time of the clip, and then the eighth is the last one, the tow. So at any one time, I can then, so once I've got the final time for that particular event, I know what a good clip is. So for me, a gold standard clip would be like 3 seconds to get that clip done. If they are taking 10, 11, 12 seconds, but all of their other segments are relatively okay, then I can go back and say, all right, but now look here, we've spent 12 seconds on that clip. If we can take, you know, 7 or 8 seconds off, that's 8 seconds just on a technique. That's not even worrying about your swimming. So for me, the data collection is extremely important in the pool. And all of our national coaches and the high performance coaches are collecting data like this. So we've standardized it. We've had a look at specific points in the pool. We know exactly, and we've based it, because when we go overseas, I then also track those times. So the world record holder for men for the 100 dummy, he's going 16 seconds underwater with the pickup before he breaks and then goes back. So I'm then now saying, right, 16 seconds is almost like the gold standard. How do we get to be that fast? What is it that you've got to do? How are you going to engage the different segments of your body to ensure that we can get a power kick, a speed kick, with the fins, etc., etc.? What is the pickup going to look like? How long are you going to take to eventually break the surface of the water? And then what time do you need to get back? So the data collection is extremely important. And I think if you break it down into segments for each event, you're then able to collect very specific data for that particular event. And then if there are any weaknesses that you note, then those are the things that you work on. For example, Ryle is beyond pedantic on the way that he, once the whistle blows and he gets up, the movement of his hips and the foot placement in order for him to move forward has to be a specific way for him. And he'll get up and he'll actually measure what is happening in the sand between, the foot that he's pushing off on and the way that his hips have moved and the semicircle that he's almost making in that as he jumps up and moves around to start moving forward again. So all of the top athletes you will find start to use segmented data in their particular event, because those are the little things that you can work on. Remember, the littlest things make the biggest difference. And if you can improve on those small things, the bigger the difference will be. And that's why it's important for the Nipper coaches, for you to really, really ensure that the foundation of all of those techniques are learned well, right from the word go. Because if they come through with bad technique, by the time they're then moving into, the elite level, technique becomes very, very difficult to try and change. So again, the Nipper coaches are seriously the most important coaches in our movement, because you are the ones that lay the foundation for good technique, for getting the kids excited, for the foundational fitness, for all the fundamental movement skills that come with coaching at that level, etc., etc. So yeah, I think, and you can try it now. Break your events up and have a look at each segment and what is the technique that is needed for each of those segments and how are you going to work on it, and see if you get any improvements. And again, it's all dependent on you as the coach. Some of us are very data driven. I'm one of those coaches, because the data tells me what you're doing with your technique. It's a very strong indicator of what's happening with your technique. So once I've got the data, I can then go back and have a look at the technique. And very often I will record over and over again, just pickups. And what I do is I give immediate feedback. So I'll record a dummy pickup, for example, then stop it and I can play it back in slow motion. And we can then sit with the swimmer concerned and say, okay, look, you haven't got your hips around, you didn't have the streamlining, you didn't push the dummy away from the wall quick enough, etc., etc. And I understand that that's very easy to do because I have a small squad. I've got a lot of time that I can pay attention to each individual athlete. When it becomes bigger groups and you've got 20 or 30 nippers in a group, it does become a lot more difficult. But again, this is where you want to get your assistant coaches in. Bring your parents in to help you, and break those, have your smaller little groups where you can just cast an eye and have a look at the technique, and get the people in there that have the know-how to come in and assist you. Because now remember, once you've done this course, the aim is that you are now going to use some of this knowledge as well as your coaching experience to impart to other coaches that are in your club, to parents that could come in and assist you. And those are going to be then your level 1 coaches. So, if you've got a big group and you want, to pay attention to some of the data, and it doesn't matter whether it's nippers or seniors or youth, whatever, who's going to be there to help you collect that data? Get the parents involved. Let them have a look and see, okay, I need to have a look at this, or I'm just recording this part of the session. And then play it back and then have a look and see and discuss and use the observations and some of the tools that they discussed in the video to really drill down and have a look at what it is that you can improve on. Because as you saw in there, you know, you can only recall between 30 and 50%. Well, that means that between the 70 or between 50 and 70% is actually lost on you because you haven't got eyes everywhere. So get people to come in and assist you and let them be your second eyes. Stand there with the video camera and you'll then be able to pick up little things in the technique that you might have missed, that you can then show the kids. The kids love it when you video them. They all want to be in the video. And then give that immediate feedback and then let them try again and then video it again and, you know, let them see that they've made an improvement because you put some kind of intervention in. So, you know, for those of you that haven't tried using data to inform how you coach, go out and try it. See what's going to work for you, and just give it a bash. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks, Heather. That's very helpful.
Pleasure. Okay, anything else? All right, so I've just got a little question there. What is the purpose of evaluating? So you can just go in and just answer that little question there as well. Okay, I'm going to move on. Yes?
Is it possible that you can share like maybe some of the cameras that you use and some of the softwares that you use? I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not exactly sure. I know of Dartfish.
Yeah, you know, some of those programs are expensive, and I just want to get my phone because there's this great little app that I've got on my phone. I just want to tell you what it's called. It's called Technique. It's HUDL Technique. It's video analysis and coaching for all sports. What I'll do is I'll just send an email with a screenshot of this, and then you just register. It's a free app, and basically I just use my phone and then our video. And what I can do with that app then is I am able to slow it down. I think the slowest it goes to is about one frame per 1/8 of a second. So it's like really, really slow. But then you've got a really good idea in terms of the technique, especially for things, you know, that happen really quickly, like flags, you know, when they get up and they move and they've got to go and get the flag. That start, and even when when they're busy diving, is extremely quick. So using something like this where you've got the video analysis that just slows everything down can certainly help. So what I'll do is I'll just put this, I'll send you the screenshot, and you can just download it from, I think it's the Google App Store. And then I just use my phone to do all my video analysis. I don't use anything fancy at all. The other thing with those fancy, with Dartfish and all of that kind of stuff is you then have to really be quite an expert in terms of what it is that you want to see, because they can go in and give you, like if you're going to be working with a sports scientist, for example, or somebody that's a biomechanicist, they can then have a look at the different angles, using the levers of the body, where they should be, where they shouldn't be, et cetera, and give you a whole lot of data. And, you can either use it or not. The thing about data is that it has to make sense to you. And I've learned over very many years of doing lots and lots of testing with life-saving athletes, is that if we don't make the data accessible and if we don't make the data friendly, user-friendly, then it's just lost on anyone, because then I'm giving you all of these numbers. They don't make sense to you as the coach. They don't make sense to the athlete. And it just becomes something that cost a lot of money and we didn't get anything out of it. So the way that we collect data has to make sense to you as the coach. And then you have to be able to translate that data back into the way that you're coaching, and to your skill development, into your drills, etc., etc. So yeah, I just, I don't use fancy equipment at all. It's just my cell phone. It's easy, and I can give immediate feedback. Any other questions?
Sorry, Heather, it's Mark. Just to add, and I think this might just add some value to the session, is with Fishhook, obviously we've had a vast turnout in terms of numbers, and something that has been adapted early by a number of the coaches was to actually, and I've seen it because I'm usually out in the fast surf and assisting, so that's where I started out, and was actually breaking up the numbers into smaller groups, so that there's not just like 30 nippers all jumping in all on top of each other, because you're hiding in amongst all your buddies, you know, and it's easier to sort of get away with chit-chatting and so forth. But also to when you break up those numbers, you start identifying a lot of the weaknesses, even in stronger nippers. For instance, I picked up, and I don't call them out on it, I just call them one at a time, and I have a little chat to them while we're out in the surf, is their confidence levels out in the surf. So you pick up a really strong nipper, suddenly conditions are a little bit adverse, and you just gain their confidence on going deep under the waves, diving deeper, and on a one-on-one level. And I've noticed, and I think that my fellow Fishhook coaches will be able to say the exact same thing, is many of the kids have just suddenly become superstars, like literally just by that little bit of I suppose acknowledgement and individual attention, and the ability to be able to overcome those fears that you know, I think you said it earlier, we all forget that they're not little adults. These you know, even the waves that we see, we're a bit scared of them. So these kids must be terrified when a big wave is coming.
Definitely. And that's why, you know, it all just boils down to who you are as a person, how you organize yourself, what your plan is for the session, you know, going in with an actual plan, execution of the plan. And sometimes you plan and it doesn't work out, you know, because you were planning for 30 nippers and now you only have 5, or, you know, whatever the case is. So the planning and the recording of what you do is extremely important. And we're going to talk about reflection in a little while as well, because reflecting on what you are doing should be something that you plan in every single one of your sessions. You know, how did it go? Why did it go this way? You know, which kid did what? How did they react to the video? How did they react to a new drill that I did, etc., etc. So all of these things, and good record keeping is vital for any coach. And it doesn't matter at what level, whether you only there once a week on a Saturday with the nippers, or whether you are more invested in your high performance athletes and you're there, you know, 6 days of the week or whatever the case is. But good record keeping really does help to keep a track on athlete, on performance, and then being able to pick up on all of those different types of technique issues that may or may not crop up every once in a while. Okay, is there anything else? All right, good. I'm just going to mute, and then we'll start with the next module, which is the safeguarding. All right, you can all see my screen. Is that correct? Okay. All right, so I'm going to just very quickly go through this presentation. It is not mine, it is Annalene Louis. She is from Netball, South Africa, and has basically written the safeguarding curriculum for SASCOC as well as for the professional body of sports coaching. She is actually assisting us quite a bit with the coach education, but especially now with the safe sport. Okay, so the first thing about safe sport is the role that you as a coach play in determining a safe and a caring environment for every single one of your athletes. You need to know how your athletes develop. You need to know where they are coming from, their environment that they're in, what school they're at, what activities they're doing, etc., etc. Because at the end of the day, you as the coach have a legal responsibility to protect those children. And you protect them against all forms of abuse and discrimination. So as a coach, you have the obligation to ensure that they receive equal opportunities, equal treatment. It doesn't matter whether, you know, they're male, female, whatever their race is, whatever language, religion, culture, etc., etc. That is what your legal responsibility is for those children that are in your care for 2 hours on a Saturday morning. And it's not just for your nippers and your youth. It's also for your older athletes as well. So please, when we're talking about safeguarding, it's not just for our kids, it's also for our older athletes as well. So here we see a typical coach. Well, hopefully it's not a typical coach, sorry. Fun, we will have none of that attitude, get out there, play and win. All of you know of a coach that has this kind of attitude and understand what the effects are on kids when coaches are always screaming and shouting at them. Some kids really adapt well to it. That's the kind of treatment that they respond to. However, what needs to be made very clear is the way in which you are speaking to any of those kids. Can it be construed in any way to be a form of verbal intimidation, verbal abuse? And that's what's very important. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. Okay, let's just go down. Okay, so the triad of safe sport involves the federation, it involves the coach, and then it involves the athlete. So it's up to the sports organization to create a safe and caring environment. The coach has a responsibility to create a safe and caring environment and ensure that the legal rights of the child or any athlete or any vulnerable person, that they are protected, that you have provided a safe space for athletes when they come into training. And that includes things like, you know, bullying from other kids. Initiations was something that came up in the last group. All that is not acceptable in any manner of means, because it has the potential to create an unsafe and an uncaring environment for the athletes within our federation. So basically the purpose of safe sports and developing protocols is to ensure that your athletes are protected, okay, to provide a very clear understanding between the role players and what their roles are. So what is the role of the federation? What is the role of the coach? And does the athlete understand that those roles and responsibilities are very clear and very delineated? And if anything does happen, does the athlete know who they can go and talk to? And that's also extremely important. So when we talk about safe sports participation protocols, what we're in the process of doing now with Helen is developing our own safeguarding policy. And I don't want to give a deadline of when that will be available, but we're definitely working on it, and it will definitely be coming out relatively shortly, where guidelines and procedures are very clearly spelt out with regards to how we create safe spaces for our athletes to participate in training, at competitions, and if they are experiencing any kind of abuse, who is that safe person that they can go and speak to. And that is what will come out in our protocols as we move forward with that. So when we talk about safeguarding, it's basically to ensure that all our athletes are provided training and competition opportunities in a safe environment. Abuse refers to any acts that will lead to a child experiencing any kind of harm. So it could be verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, etc., etc. And then the difference between harm and violence is also there. And it's important that we understand what these definitions are so that we're very, very clear when we do come to reporting any kind of abuse or any kind of violence or any kind of harm that has taken place within any of our athletes, that we know exactly what it is that we are talking about. Okay, so what we are busy going through now is developing our safeguarding policies and protocols and our procedures. There'll be guidelines that will be given for parents, volunteers, athletes, managers, etc., etc. We want to ensure that we minimize any risk to any of our children that come in for training and or competition. Zero tolerance for discrimination, zero tolerance for racism, that we instill values of dignity, respect, sensitivity, and fairness. And that's where, you know, in all of our training sessions, we need to also remember that we're not only training the physical, but we're also training the mental, the cognitive, and the spiritual in everything that we do. And the spiritual doesn't mean, you know, Christianity and all of that kind of thing. It means being able to, for allowing kids to connect to themselves and being able for them to grow and develop, knowing who they are. And that is important. And obviously all of that requires a safe space for them to do that. And then obviously your monitoring and evaluation becomes extremely important, especially if you do have an incident that happens either in your club or to a athlete in your club. You know, somebody may have had some kind of physical abuse or sexual abuse that didn't happen within the life-saving environment, but happened at home or at school or whatever the case is. And then how do you deal with things like that? All right, so as I said, we are in the process, Life Saving is in the process of developing policies and procedures for safeguarding. And I think we all understand the necessity and the importance of having these policies within our federation. So if we have a look at some of these stats, 1 out of 5 girls is sexually abused before they turn 12. 1 out of 4 before they turn 18. 1 out of 8 boys is sexually abused before they turn 12. 1 out of 6 before they are 18. So if you just take these stats and apply them to your group of athletes that are coming through to you every single weekend or every day, what are the chances that one of your girls or one of your boys has had some kind of sexual abuse happen to them at some point? We all understand on a national level, the government has been quite proactive in terms of gender-based violence and creating awareness and all of those kinds of things. And these are the things that we need to be talking about in our clubs. These are the things that we need to be making aware of in our clubs at all levels, whether it's our nippers, our youth, our seniors. Every single person needs to know that as a sport, as a federation, we are there to protect our athletes, no matter what is happening. That is what our primary role is to protect and to create safe spaces for our athletes to train and compete. Because we do not want to be having any of our athletes becoming one of these statistics. And we understand the abuse that happens in sports. I mean, you know, it's what was happening in swimming in the USA. If you've watched Athletes A on Netflix about the abuse with the United States Olympic gymnasts, it's out there. And we cannot be naive to think that this is not happening within our federation, because it is. It is in life-saving. Just like when we talked about WADA last week, and it is in life-saving, with doping and also with some of the abuse that is taking place with our athletes. So we really need to start being more proactive in terms of how we view what is it that we are doing, how are we creating these safe spaces for our athletes. Okay, then it just goes on to have a look in terms of the duty of care and the standard of care. And this also is reflected in the Coaches Code of Conduct. We speak about duty of care and standard of care, and understanding exactly what that means. And then also just understanding the legal issues when it comes to the provision of training and competition. So that becomes very important as well. I don't want to, you can all go through this in much more detail. But as coaches of children, we need to ensure that every child or young person who takes part in sport should be able to participate in a fun and safe environment, be protected from neglect, physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. So let's make sure that this word gets out. If you see or you know any of your coaches that are either neglecting some of your athletes, that are verbally abusing them, that are shouting and screaming at them, call them out, call them up on it, because we have a zero tolerance policy for anything like that with regards to our athletes. Okay. So the Children's Act goes into, there's quite a bit of detail here in terms of abuse and what it means in relation to a child, and the different types of abuse that can be inflicted. So it's either assault, sexual abuse, bullying is a big one, exploiting children, you know, for unfair labor practices, and then exposing any children to behavior that could harm them either psychologically or emotionally. And I think, you know, as coaches, we understand that our words have a big impact on our athletes. So we always have to be extremely careful. How can our words be misconstrued and provide potential harm for any kind of athlete? An example of that would be, you know, for example, when your female athletes are going through puberty and they put on a bit of weight and all of that kind of stuff, the last thing in the world you want to be telling that female athlete is that she's getting fat, or that she needs to lose weight, or, you know, she needs to go on a diet, or whatever the case is, and call her out on it in the rest of the group or your squad, etc., etc. So everything that we say, we need to be very careful of, because often we don't understand what the ramifications are going to be for the words that we are using during training and during competition.
Can I just also mention here?
Sure.
You know, when it comes to this, it's a case of being treated fairly. So if in your club, all the juniors, part of the junior protocol is to grab a broom and sweep the floors and dust a cloth and dust the counters and everything else. If every junior is doing that, it's not abuse. But if every week one junior is tasked to do that work, that could be construed as such. So it's a case of being treated fairly.
Great. Thanks, Helen, for that. Okay. And then in this presentation, we also go through having a look at the differences and the concerns around child trafficking, which I don't want to spend too much time on. Then we also have a look at what bullying means. And this could be cyberbullying. It could be name calling at training. You know, kids are very cruel in some ways because they just tell it as it is. If somebody is fat, they're going to say you fat. And again, they don't understand. Sometimes they do understand what the ramifications of that are going to be. And that's where you as a coach have a responsibility to step in and use that as a teaching moment. Make an example of that, not of the kids, but make an example of that particular moment. Why is it that we don't tolerate people calling other people fat? How does it make you feel, etc., etc.? So, you know, our job as coaches is not just there to go and coach. We are there to provide stability, safety, opportunities, but we are also there to be the moral beacon for our federation and the moral beacon for our athletes, especially the youngsters as they move forward. Okay, so the bullying, the discrimination, and Helen went through that in terms of the fairness and the treatment of such. And then we got the grooming, and the grooming and the hazing relates directly to sexual abuse. And sexual abuse usually isn't just a once-off. It starts off with grooming. It starts off with hazing. It starts off where, you know, appropriate behavior starts to move into inappropriate behavior. And then the whole sexual abuse becomes something that possibly the child is not able to get out of because they've had so much time to get used to this person who they trust, who they look up to, who has shared stuff with them. So by the time it gets to the actual sexual abuse, they just think it's part of the normal behavior because they've been groomed, they've been hazed into this kind of sexual abuse and thinking that, oh, this must be okay because my coaches told me that it's okay. And it's my secret that me and my coach have only got. And he said to me that I can't tell anybody, so I'm not going to tell anybody. And it becomes a very big problem. And so, you know, when it comes to things like going on tour, who are coaches sharing with? Are coaches sharing with your athletes? If you are having a coach that's doing rub downs, for example, are they doing it behind closed doors? What is happening with the coaches, the managers, the management team, and your athletes at all times? So again, it's something that you know nobody likes to talk about, but we have to have these conversations, and we have to call up the people that are involved and make sure that we're creating safe spaces for our athletes. And then I'll go through, the different types of grooming, the hazing, etc., etc. So I don't want to go into too much detail there. So you can just go through that as well. One of the things that we also need to realize is that if we ourselves know that some kind of abuse is happening and we do not report it, we are just as liable as anybody else in that particular situation. So if we do know that something is happening, or if a child has come to you in confidence, you have a responsibility to do something. You can't just say, oh, but I don't feel comfortable. It might be my best mate who's the coach, or whatever the case is. You have to do something. And it's a very, very tricky thing to do. But if you don't take a stand, then it just means that abuse is going to carry on. It's going to be more widespread, and it just becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger issue. So really, really, if you know, if kids have come to you and have told you, you have to be able to do something about it. Okay, so then we go through the different signs of abuse, and I'm not going to go through that again. You can just read through all of this. How to recognize abuse and neglect. So there are a couple of steps that you can go through as well. And one thing about who are the perpetrators, they are anybody. They can be the national coach. They can be your next door neighbor. They can be one of your parents. They could be one of your athletes. They could be somebody at the school. They could be somebody from another sports federation, etc., etc., a fellow coach. So there's no specific profile when you look at somebody and you think, oh, they look a bit dodgy. Oh, they must be. No. They just sitting here with us and we don't even know it. They're in our federation. We don't even know it. So those are the perpetrators. And then your victims are anybody that falls victim to any kind of harassment, abuse, etc., etc., etc. So it's not just, because you're a certain denomination, or you're a certain race, or you're a certain anything. Perpetrators are out there. You would never, ever know them. The victims are out there. You would also never, never know them until they come forward and they start speaking. And then you get to know who they are. And they could be right there sitting in your club and you don't even know it.
Sorry, Heather, sorry to interrupt you. Just a quick one as well. Heather, it can be a lot more innocent and not intentional, and a lot more subtle than what we're all kind of got in our minds at the moment. Is that, for example, just a careless word from a coach, for example, well, if you just lost a little bit of weight, you'd be a little bit faster, or something along those lines. That psychologically, with the age groups that we're dealing with, these children are very, very susceptible to psychological trauma caused through something like that. So a flippant comment, for example, like, look, you put on a little bit of weight, see if you can shed a bit, you'll be a bit quicker. Something like that can lead to that child becoming anorexic, etc., etc. So as a coach, it really is an absolute minefield that we're walking through. A comment like that was meant to encourage the athletes, but in actual fact, it does completely the opposite and leads to all sorts of psychological aspects. And so it can be very subtle. So it's not as cut and dried and as how can I say, vile and aggressive as one can imagine when one talks about abuse. It can be such a subtle little thing and such an innocent little comment that can be truly taken to heart by an emotionally sensitive youngster.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why our words matter. And that's why we've got to think before we speak. And that's why we've got to just understand that whatever comes out of our mouths could have serious repercussions. And, you know, it's not just the girls. You were specifically talking about the weights, but the boys are also fall in that category. You know, so you can't think, oh, because he's a big strapping young man and I can, you know, mess around with him and tell him he's putting on a bit of weight and this and that and think that it's not going to affect him. It affects boys just as much as girls. It might just be in a different way. Words matter.
The one other one that I just wanted to mention quickly, Heather, was the abuse of neglect. I know that sounds weird, but you know, when you've got half a dozen star performers, it's so easy to focus on them and just simply, not out of any how can I say a negative side of things, but just instinctively avoid those that are kind of just the kind of no-hopers, if you like, the little fat one at the back, as you mentioned in the previous thing. And so when they cross the line, you know, people don't make a fuss of it, and we tend to focus just on those star performers. And the ones at the back there are just not seen. And this came around to me from last season when a little nipper was saying to me while I was out in the water assisting, he said, oh, I'm no good at this and I'm useless, etc., etc. And as you know, I encouraged her, as all coaches should. And that same girl won a medal in the Western Province Championships. And she said, you know, coach, only here at Nippers do my coaches see me. It's the first time in my life coaches have ever actually seen me. And that's something for us just to bear in mind, especially when we're coaching the large numbers in the surf. You know, it's unusual, it's different to the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Where we, like Chris was mentioning earlier, we do have larger numbers, and to try and focus individually is difficult. But the neglect of the abuse of neglect is something that one should also bear in mind.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
Sorry, Heather. Just on the topic, there were four major points raised about abuse, and I think that one of the most important that is forgotten is actual verbal, because I know it falls under emotional, but you know, verbal, telling somebody, listen, you're stupid, or don't be stupid, you know, that at any level is abuse. And I think maybe out of the four there should be five, because emotional and verbal, although they fall close, I think sometimes things are said in jest and sometimes they're not, and they still form part of that abusive cycle.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why, you know, I keep saying that our words matter. Our words definitely matter. I mean, I've been on pool deck where a fellow life-saving coach was on the pool, and they were swearing like anything at their athletes, and I was just completely dumbstruck as to the kind of behavior that coach was demonstrating at that point in time. And it was something that I then went to go and speak to them about, and they didn't even know that's what they were doing. I mean, because they've been doing it for so long, it kind of just becomes something that he does and that the athletes accept, but that's not acceptable. And again, all of us have a moral and ethical duty to ensure that we call up anybody who is demonstrating any kind of abuse, doesn't matter what it is, towards our athletes. Another big one, and this actually came up in some of the research that I did, was this whole thing around racism, especially like on the start line for some of the surf events, you know, just the snide little comments here and there, and the bullying as they're moving in and all of that kind of stuff. And that also, as coaches, if you see that, it needs to be stopped immediately, because we can't have it then coming into any kind of competition at any level. So again, we have a duty to be aware of what is happening, what is being said, who is saying it, what are the effects going to be. Okay, so basically, in terms of the safety at sports and rec events, the Act of 2010, every single sports federation has to ensure the physical well-being and the safety of every single person that is participating at a particular event. So whether it's at a venue, at a stadium, anywhere, that is what, as Alice said, for example, when we're putting on nationals, it's a huge thing to ensure the safety of all our competitors at any kind of event. And the safety then is not only, you know, safety from, you know, the weather and tent pegs and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. It's also ensuring that any kind of abuse, neglect, etc., that we've just spoken about does not happen at a particular event. Okay, so I'm not going to go through any of this. You can, the slideshow is there for you to have a look at. I want to now just go into very quickly, and I see that we have run over time. So I want to just quickly finish this. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for 2 seconds while I try to get out of here. And again, all of this is available for you. So I just quickly want to share my screen again so we can just watch this video.
Hi, good day. My name is Mark Hardwick. I'm the MD of The Guardian, and we are the appointed safeguarding partner to a number of South African sporting federations. And as we've gone down the road of developing that relationship and of growing the safeguarding within these various federations, I just thought it might be prudent to answer a couple of questions. First and foremost, why safeguarding? Why all of a sudden is there a massive focus on safeguarding within sport? Secondly, once we implement safeguarding, who is it that we're trying to protect? And I suppose finally, what are we protecting them against? So very quickly to run through why safeguarding. The IOC, or the International Olympic Committee Consensus Statement of 2016, basically says that all sports organizations need to implement and monitor policies and procedures with regard to safe sports. Every single federation also needs to deliver an education program for all main stakeholders in the safeguarding space. And they have to appoint and work with qualified or designated personnel responsible for safe sport programming and athlete welfare. We all know that SASCOC last year, at the end of last year, put out their draft safeguarding policy, and that requires that all national federations develop and implement sport safeguarding policies. All international federations now are driving for national federations to have safeguarding policy and procedures. And the CAS Action Plan, to which South Africa is a signatory, it was signed in 2017, says many things in the safeguarding space, but the 3 takeaways from there that federations need to be considering is, number 1, the national sport bodies need to have formal policies to protect children, youth, and other vulnerable groups. Number 2, all national sports bodies have to have a nominated child protection officer and nominated sport integrity officer. And number 3, all athletes, coaches, and sports officials have participated in at least one training or orientation session on the protection of children, youth, and other vulnerable groups. It's all good and well knowing the legislation and knowing the policies, but our engagement with the federations and what we're bringing to the organizations and bringing to the federations is a need for employing moral and ethical responsibility for safeguarding. And I think that if we can find a place where within the federation it becomes a culture that safeguarding is a priority, by default, the things like the policies and procedures and legislation will automatically be ticked. Establishing a culture of safeguarding is a process, it's not an action. It's not something you can do. It's something that has to happen over time. And I honestly believe that only those that are responsible for driving that process will genuinely safeguard children. So that really answers why safeguarding. When we look at who we are safeguarding, there are various demographics that are defined as vulnerable athletes. Children unquestionably are in there. Young adults, people with mental or physical disabilities, competitive athletes, women, elderly persons, other vulnerable adults. It's important that we know that these demographics over history have been the complainants in most of our cases, and we need to be taking steps to ensure that all vulnerable athletes are taken care of, that policy is in place, and that procedures are in place to drive a safeguarding culture within every single federation. What is it that we need to safeguard them against? Well, excuse me, most sports, all sports, have rules, and those rules are in place to ensure that the game is played fairly, and also to ensure that the athletes playing the game don't get hurt whilst playing the game. The safeguarding we're talking about is not that level of safeguarding. We're talking about safeguarding against abuse. We're talking about safeguarding against assault, sexual harassment, sexual assault, inappropriate training practices, discrimination, intimidation. Primarily, the goal is to ensure that all elements are handled with integrity and in the best interests of both the athlete and sport. I think that we have all heard of or seen the documentary Athlete A, where we know that just as a result of failing to ensure that the culture of safeguarding was a priority, that many athletes within the US gymnastics team over 3 decades were hurt, sexually assaulted, and taken advantage of. And that is certainly not something that we want to find in 3-4 years' time has happened in a federation that we are responsible for. So if you would like us to assist you, we will meet you where you are. We will assist you in closing the gaps that you may feel that you have. Please reach out to us. Email address is easy at sport@theguardian.co.za. We look forward to hearing from you, and we really hope that it becomes the driver in all federations to ensure that all athletes are safe. Thank you.
Sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Helen has started to engage with the Guardian, and we are definitely hoping that we will be able to work something out with them. What they've got is an anonymous reporting app that is available for everybody, and in that app, if somebody doesn't feel safe or they've had some kind of abuse happen to them, that app is there, and then there's a whole lot of processes and reporting structures that happen. So this is something that we are aspiring to at this point in time. It's not being implemented yet, but we definitely are working on the policies, the procedures, etc., for safeguarding.
Can I butt in there just to update everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Life Saving South Africa is contracting with the Guardian. As you currently know, all coaches, squad leaders, anybody having to do anything with responsibility, dealing with minors, currently have to have a police clearance. Now, the Guardian does a in-depth check. They check on 3 sides. They do a criminal clearance, they do a sexual offences clearance, and they do a child protection clearance. And we are currently rolling out those clearances on the same basis as we have for our general name clearance at the moment, for which you get charged if you work through head office about 120 Rand a clearance, which is only 1 clearance. The Guardian is doing all 3 clearances for us at a price of 250 Rand plus VAT. So what we are currently doing is we're currently joining up with the other sporting federations, working with the Guardian, and finding out places where their investigators, call it their investigators, but their technicians are going to be based at various sporting venues to enable our coaches, administrators, etc., to take up the offer of getting all 3 clearances. But to do that, you need to book your time with head office and pay LSA, because we pay that across to the Guardian. On the 7th of November, I think it is, I must just check, there is the technician will be based in Johannesburg at the Emmarentia Dam Canoe Club. We are working with SA Canoeing, we are working with SA Gymnastics, we are working with other federations as well, and we hope to have some other dates coming out soon for KZN and Western Cape. So we will put these dates, we'll put these opportunities out there, because what has to happen with the Guardian is it's not just give us your ID number and a copy of your ID. It's a case of give us your ID number, a copy of your ID, a certified clear copy of your ID, plus your fingerprints. So the technician takes your fingerprints, and you only ever need to submit your ID document and your fingerprints once. You do not need to submit them again. To actually get the technician and your details on the database, and we can actually then thereafter every 2 years resubmit the various documentation. So it doesn't mean that you have to redo the whole technical side of this, but every 2 years you'd have to reapply for it. I'm out.
Thanks, Helen. In the Google Classroom, you'll also see that I've given you a copy of the SASCOC safeguarding policy, so that you've got that as some reference material there. All right, so that brings us to the end of this course. Are there any questions anybody would like to ask? I apologize that we are now sitting at 22 minutes over 4 o'clock.
Heather, I just had a quick question for Helen. So it's really encouraging to hear that Life Saving South Africa is working with the Guardian. But I wanted to find out the process that you described now. Will that be mandatory for all coaches working with nippers and lifesavers? And when will it become mandatory? Because this is something we'd definitely like to take back into the club and to start to talk to the other coaches that aren't on this course about and prepare them for it.
All right. There's 3 aspects to the Guardian's intervention. Well, not intervention, partnership, if you want to call it that. The first one is setting the policies, as Heather has indicated. So what is our ethos, what are our standards as far as our policies go? And we just fine-tuning that at the moment. So that is looking at, like we have at the moment, we have a policy on abuse, we have a policy on dealing with minors, we have a policy, we have a couple of separate policies. Now what this policy document is putting is putting all of those policies into one policy. Then it's looking at, as Heather's also mentioned, your safeguarding officers. So looking at who in your club, now a club like Fishhook is huge. So I would say to Fishhook, in your club, you might need to have 2 or 3 safeguarding officers, because you might find that you want to have someone that's going to look after your junior nippers. You might want to have somebody that looks after your preteens. You want to have somebody who looks after your juniors and seniors. So there's that option. And these are the people that are going to pick up the reports. So these are the first person in the club that the report is going to. Whether it's submitted by the anonymous app, or whether it's submitted in person, or whether you pick up something that is not right, this is the person who's going to start the process. Then there needs to be a provincial safeguarding officer that just coordinates stuff and also just takes a little bit of a more senior role. And then there's a national one. But from a coach perspective and these 3 clearances, we are trying to say to people, when your current police clearance expires, or if you feel very strongly before your current police clearance expires, let's take up this offer, because it will make it that much more secure for you as a coach, not for anybody else, but for you as a coach. You know you've done everything in your power to make sure that you are covered. We're making the opportunities available so that the clubs, the coaches, the administrators, etc., have something to fall back on and say, listen, you know, I've done this clearance. The police have done this investigation on me. Here is my report. If you want to have it, you can have it. You can put it up there. You can frame it and stick it on a wall if you want to. In fact, some of the courses, they do have a certificate or what have you, where the clubs can say they are safeguarding compliant. In other words, all their coaches and all their administrators, etc., have been vetted according to the safeguarding process, and that can be put up so that parents and children and those who are vulnerable, etc., can see that, okay, well, you know, I can actually come here and feel safe. And if I don't feel safe, there's a process and a policy in which it can be dealt with. So, you know, when are we going to make it compulsory? I have one or two of my board members that I have to try and convince that it needs to be compulsory. But from my personal aspect, it needs to be compulsory right now. But I understand from a where we are in South Africa aspect right now, we're not going to force anybody to make it compulsory. We have a couple of the clubs that have come back to us and said, we want it and we want it now. Obviously, in many cases, it's your bigger clubs. It's something that we can turn around and I can say to my one or two board members, please, guys, don't delay this any longer. Don't, you know, you've got to give me permission to put my signature at the bottom of this form so that we can now start rolling this out in its entirety. So that's where I'm at. I've got one or two people who are still humming and hawing, and they're not too sure how or why or where it actually goes. But from a protection of, if I was still coaching right now, and coaching is a passion with me. If I was coaching right now, I would do this. In fact, I've done it. I'm not even coaching. I have done all 3 clearances with the Guardian. You know, so that is how passionate I feel about it. So
yeah, thanks, Helen. It's just the reason I ask is that this seems to me less like something you that specifically for nippers that parents would look at and say that this is a proactive stance by a club, and very fast is becoming more of an expectation. So I don't actually feel safe if the club hasn't gone through this. So it's great that that's come up in this training. I certainly wasn't aware of all of the discussions that the Federation was having with the Guardians, and I wasn't even aware of the Guardians. So it's great that it's come out now, and please keep us posted then on any developments from your side.
Yeah, we definitely will. What we did from an LSA perspective is we actually looked at a number of options, a number of companies and a number of options, and how best to try and match them. And in our investigations, we found that our current company that we're working with is good for the police clearances. They do it fairly cheaply, etc. Not a problem. They've given us that option leading up to this point in time, but they can't give us the same value for money that the Guardian can give us.
All right, got it.
You know, so if we go through another company, they're going to charge you 700, 800, 900 Rand to do these 3 clearances. Whereas if we go through the Guardian, they're saying their passion is sport. The owner of the Guardian is a member of Lifesaving. You know, so there is a very strong tie to us as a federation. You know, so he's tailor-made the costs, he's tailor-made the applications, everything else to try and suit our environment and not necessarily SA Rugby's environment or SA Gymnastics environment, etc. You know, so I'm very happy to work with them.
Super. Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Helen. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question for Helen.
Just a quick one. I mean, yeah, I
Okay,
also got the same question. We at Fishhook, I mean, okay, at Fishhook, we've just done all our police clearance. We had the lady coming around, take fingerprints, and obviously all 10 fingers, and obviously ID, certified ID and stuff like that. It was just done now in September or the end of August, before the season started. Would we not be able to use that same information and then maybe just go through with the Guardian with the same information, or would they prefer that you to do it again? I mean, just to ask a question.
Yeah, just from that aspect. Sorry, Salim, we'll get back to you. The Guardian application, you know, we can say, okay, fine, from a name clearance perspective, from a criminal clearance perspective, that's one aspect. But it means when that expires, you then need to redo that. But you still need to do the child protection and the sexual offenses.
Yeah.
You know, so that is still 2 of the 3 clearances. So you can say, okay, fine, well, I've just done my clearance. Everything's great. In 2 years' time, I'll go with the Guardian. We will respect that. But you will also have to take that past your club and say, well, you know, from a club's perspective, does the club, will the club accept that? You know, so that has to be taken into consideration. We are sitting in a situation where we know we're running with 2 bodies at this present point in time, because I haven't got my board to sign that bottom line in its totality at this point in time. So if I turn around and I say to you, when at the end of this season, from the 1st of April, we are going to go 100% with the Guardian, then for the next season, irrespective of whether you have the current revert clearance or a current police criminal clearance, you'd have to go and redo your clearances with the Guardian.
Fully agree with that.
Okay, all right.
No, Julian.
It's not Julian.
So basically, you just answered my question, because I wanted to ask if we have to wait for the 2 years before we apply for the other 2 clearances.
Yeah, if I've answered the question, are you happy, or you still want another answer on that?
No, I'm happy with it. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Great. Are there any other questions?
Yes, if I may have just one final one. I think Helen, just firstly, it's not a question, just I think it's a statement, and I think I speak on the collective. We want it now, and we want it compulsory. So you've got our backing, because I think it's absolutely imperative that gets put into place. And then Heather, if I may ask, just relating to the course in terms of all the little goodies, the portfolio of evidence and all of the little assignments that we've got to submit. I don't want anyone to have to do my work for me, but is there any overview of all the little things that we need to do? Because I've received quite an overwhelming amount of emails, and I think you're aware I've got and I'm sure everyone else does, have quite a few things on our plate. And in order to streamline it, is there sort of a list of requirements saying, number 1, complete the questionnaire related to qualities and the qualities and something of a coach, you know, and number 2, complete why you're a coach. Number 3, complete that. Is there anything that can give us a guided overview?
Mark, no, I haven't done a checklist like that.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see what I can do. If it's going to make your life a little easier, then it's easy for me, because I'll just go through each of the modules and then just put a checklist together, and I'll put it in under the first section where you've got portfolio of evidence, LSA level 2 online learner guide. I'll just make a little tab in there, and then you can have a little checklist of all the things that you need to have completed. I'll do that.
I would really appreciate that. And I think as a collective, again, I think everyone would appreciate it, because then it kind of streamline. You know, I've already started with a portfolio of evidence, and I've taken the list and started checking off all the things that I've got.
Okay.
It's just easier to refer back to a list as opposed to trying to sort of pull all the emails and backwards and forwards, because it's just quite time consuming. So if you could do that, I would greatly appreciate that.
I will do that.
I second that, Mark. Thanks, Mark. It's a good question to ask. Yeah, I also be nice to know, what else have I had to do? I mean, I've done this, I've done that. What else is I get? So at least the list is there to help me make sure that I can.
Cool.
Okay, that's a great idea. I'll work on that, and then I'll just put it up and send out a mail to everyone, and then you can just access it in the classroom.
Cool.
Is there anything else
Wonderful.
that anybody would like me to do, or any other comments? Okay, great. Well, I think we're well over time. So again, thank you very much for your time on a Saturday afternoon. I think we've had some good discussions, so thank you for that. Good luck. And if there are any questions, please feel free to either email me. And all I ask is when you do email me, please don't use the Gmail address of mine, which is what you get when I send out an announcement from the Google Classroom, because I'm very bad at checking my Gmail. So if you can just use my work address at the UJ work address, then I'll definitely be able to get back to you ASAP. Otherwise, you know, with Valencia or Martina, you're welcome to ask them any questions as well. So once again, thank you very much. Helen, thank you very much for putting the Zoom meeting and organizing the Zoom meeting for us. We do appreciate it. And good luck, and hopefully we'll be able to see all of you relatively soon. It'll be nice to meet everybody when we can. So have a good afternoon and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you.